Rain pounded against the cracked pavement like the frantic heartbeat of a city that had forgotten mercy. Shadows lurked in every corner, stretching long and thin under the flickering streetlights, each one hiding a threat that didn't need a face. I felt the weight of the night pressing down, thick and suffocating, as though the world itself was conspiring to swallow us whole. My wife, heavy with our unborn child, gripped my hand, her skin clammy, her breathing shallow. I could feel the tension radiating off her, a silent alarm that screamed danger even before I saw them. That's when they appeared, figures moving with the precision of authority, yet with a sinister edge that set every nerve on fire. Fake badges glimmered under the dim light, a cruel parody of the law, and the reality hit me. These weren't here to protect, they were here to dominate, to instill fear, to take what they wanted without consequence. Time slowed, each second stretching into a lifetime as their footsteps echoed against the walls. The air grew heavy with the metallic tang of imminent violence, the kind that seeps into your bones before it ever reaches the skin. I watched, heart hammering, as one of them reached for her, crushing her arm with a brutality that made my blood boil. Pain and fear collided in a way that left me numb, yet every fiber of my being screamed for action. I had always imagined this moment would be a nightmare, the kind you wake up from in a cold sweat. But nightmares have rules. This was reality. And reality doesn't care about your imagination. The Glock 19 in my hand felt impossibly heavy and impossibly right. Each breath I drew sharpened my focus, my vision narrowing until the world outside that moment disappeared. It was just us and the threat and the choice I had to make before the next heartbeat. The air vibrated with tension, the kind that makes silence scream, as I felt the inevitable collision of fear and resolve. Every instinct, every memory of injustice, every story of those who suffered without reprieve, all funneled into that single, crystalline moment. I didn't have to think, I just moved, and the world tilted violently with the weight of what was about to unfold. Hit subscribe, watch till the end. The night after the attack lingered in my mind like a shadow that refused to fade. Our home, usually a sanctuary, now felt like a cage, each corner whispering threats I couldn't ignore. The walls seemed thinner, the streetlights outside dimmer, as though the world itself was conspiring to remind us that safety was never guaranteed. My wife moved cautiously, every step measured, her hand never leaving mine. I could feel the pulse of our unborn child between us, a fragile heartbeat tethered to a storm of fear. Days had always passed predictably in this neighborhood, but something had shifted. The HOA, once a faceless bureaucratic annoyance, now loomed like a predator. Flyers with subtle threats littered the mailbox. Faces I didn't recognize lingered too long at corners. The community that once whispered civility now hummed with quiet menace, a tension that crept under doors and into our nerves. Every glance from a neighbor, every car slowing in front of our house, carried the weight of scrutiny, judgment, and something darker that refused to name itself. I walked through the rooms, cataloging memories of laughter and peace, trying to anchor myself in normalcy. But the echoes of the attack clawed at my mind. Her arm had been crushed, and with it, a piece of our innocence. The sting of betrayal, of those entrusted with civility turning predator, gnawed at me relentlessly. I remembered every detail, the gleam of their fake badges, the cruel precision of their intimidation, the metallic promise in the Glock 19 that had rested in my hand, waiting. Even the mundane became charged. The creak of a floorboard, the rustle of leaves outside, the distant bark of a dog, all transformed into signals of danger. I began noticing patterns, small anomalies that had once seemed trivial, the way the HOA president's car always appeared at odd hours, the way certain neighbors' eyes lingered with curiosity or malice. It was subtle but unmistakable. A network of control, poised to snuff out anyone who dared to exist outside their narrow rules. Amid the tension, my resolve hardened. Fear was a lens, sharpening my perception. Every heartbeat reminded me that protecting my family was no longer just instinct. It was a responsibility born from raw necessity. I imagined scenarios, rehearsed movements in silence, each one a mental preparation for the inevitability I knew loomed, confrontation, resistance, and the stark reality of standing against those who wielded authority like a weapon. Even in the shadows, even under the weight of uncertainty, one truth remained irrefutable: we would not be broken. Every silent step, every measured breath, every unspoken glance between my wife and me reinforced a promise forged in fire: the determination to survive, to fight back, and to reclaim the peace that had been stolen. The days blurred into a haze of vigilance and unease. Every knock on the door, every unfamiliar footstep on the driveway, sent a jolt through me, a reminder that the predators who had crushed my wife's arm were still out there, watching, waiting. The HOA's influence seeped into every corner of the neighborhood like a dark fog. Rules were enforced with a cruelty that seemed invisible to outsiders, warnings that felt like threats, inspections that felt like invasions, and subtle acts of intimidation designed to make us doubt our own right to exist. I noticed the patterns first in small, almost imperceptible ways. Surveillance cameras at neighboring houses seemed to track our movements. Letters arrived in envelopes thick with unspoken menace. Even the children playing on lawns seemed to hesitate when we passed, their laughter clipped by the presence of invisible authority. It wasn't just control, it was a warning, a declaration that any misstep could invite ruin. At night, the fear became tangible. Shadows moved differently around our home. The wind carried whispers of malice, the creak of the old fence like a signal of pending intrusion. I watched my wife, cautious and protective, her gaze scanning every hallway, her body tensed as if bracing for the next attack. Her suffering weighed on me, a constant reminder that the stakes were no longer theoretical. Every plan I imagined, every movement I rehearsed, was driven by one purpose: to shield her and our unborn child from the darkness gathering around us. Then came the first confrontation. A vehicle slowed at the end of our driveway, a black SUV with darkened windows and a presence that radiated authority without law. Figures stepped out, silhouettes of menace. They claimed rules and regulations, but their eyes revealed something else: arrogance, entitlement, and an appetite for fear. They measured my home, my family, as though it were theirs to dictate, their gestures a choreography of intimidation. I felt the weight of history pressing down, the countless stories of people like us, challenged, marginalized, and silenced by those who wore power like armor. The tension grew with each passing day. Emails became threats, phone calls carried subtle warnings, neighbors whispered with either complicity or fear. Every encounter deepened the psychological assault, each act of intimidation pushing me further along a path I had never imagined walking. Yet, amid the growing danger, clarity emerged. The fear that once paralyzed became a weapon in its own right, a sharpened edge guiding every thought, every decision, every heartbeat. I knew the moment of truth was approaching. Every shadow, every step, every silence told me the confrontation was inevitable. The HOA's grip, the threat they represented, was no longer distant. It had crept into our lives, into our home, into the very fabric of our existence. And when it came, I would not falter. Every instinct, every ounce of training, every memory of injustice fueled a readiness I had prayed I would never need. The night had thickened into a black so complete it swallowed everything outside the faint halo of our porch light. Each shadow seemed alive, stretching, bending, waiting for the moment to strike. My pulse had become a drumbeat of inevitability, steady, relentless, echoing the memory of her crushed arm and the threat that still lingered in the air. The air itself was charged with menace, every gust of wind carrying the promise of confrontation, every creak of the old wooden floor a herald of the storm about to break. The SUV returned, gliding to a halt at the end of our driveway like a predator circling its prey. Figures emerged, their movements precise and deliberate, masks of authority worn over eyes that had nothing but cruelty in them. They believed fear alone could bend us, that intimidation was enough to strip away our agency. They were wrong. I moved silently behind the shadows of the porch, feeling the weight of the Glock 19 in my hand, its cold steel a reminder that choice and consequence were inseparable. My wife stood close, her trembling body a fragile testament to the violence already inflicted. I could see the disbelief in their stance, the arrogance that had been their armor. They didn't know what they were facing, The fury of someone who had lost innocence, the clarity of someone who had been forced into vigilance. They approached the door, voices masked by the night but carrying the sharpness of command. I didn't wait for words, didn't hesitate. The first movement was decisive, a blur of instinct and precision. The Glock roared in the darkness, each shot a punctuation of warning, a declaration that we would not be victims. Their reaction was almost cinematic. The instant shift from arrogance to chaos, the falter in their confidence as they realized that authority without justice is nothing but fragility. One by one, they retreated, stumbling over the curb, their posture crumpled under the sudden weight of resistance. Fear replaced their entitlement, confusion replaced arrogance, and in that moment, the balance shifted. No longer shadows looming over us, they became vulnerable, exposed to the consequences of their own cruelty. The air vibrated with the aftermath, the ringing silence that follows sudden violence, and in that silence, a strange clarity emerged. I lowered the Glock, my hands still trembling from adrenaline, yet the fear that had gripped us for weeks began to dissipate, replaced by a stark awareness of survival and justice. My wife's arm, bruised and tender, rested in mine, and I could feel the pulse of our unborn child like a heartbeat of defiance. The HOA, the figures who had sought to dominate us, had been forced to confront a truth they had never expected. Power unearned and unchecked is fragile, and resolve born from love and protection is unstoppable. Outside, the night remained dark, yet it felt lighter somehow, as if the shadows themselves had been rebalanced. Every sound, the wind rustling through the trees, the distant hum of the city, was a reminder that life goes on, and that standing firm against injustice can reclaim the space meant for fear. We were still vulnerable, yes, and the world beyond our doorstep was no less complicated, but in that small, violent confrontation, we had carved out a piece of certainty, that our lives, our bodies, our family would not be subjugated by intimidation or cruelty. The adrenaline ebbed slowly, leaving in its wake a clarity I had never known. Each breath was deliberate, each heartbeat a marker of survival. The confrontation had reached its apex, and we emerged not unscathed, but unbroken. And as the first hints of dawn crept into the sky, I realized that moments like this, moments of terror, courage, and raw humanity, define the boundary between submission and defiance. The first light of dawn filtered through the blinds, soft and fragile, yet impossibly profound after the darkness of the night. Our home, once a place of quiet fear, now carried the echo of resilience. Every corner, every shadow, seemed to breathe relief alongside us. The violence had passed, but its memory lingered, carved into muscles, bones, and the mind. My wife sat quietly, her arm wrapped gently, the warmth of our unborn child anchoring us in the reality we had fought to protect. Outside, the neighborhood remained unchanged, but I saw it differently. The same streets, the same houses, now carried the weight of our defiance. Authority, once a looming threat, had been tested and found wanting. The HOA, the figures who had sought to dominate through intimidation, had been forced to reckon with the limits of fear. In their retreat, a message had been sent, unspoken yet unmistakable. Courage can disrupt control, and love can defy oppression. I walked through the rooms, noticing small details I had once overlooked. The way sunlight hit the floorboards, the soft creak of the ceiling, the faint hum of the refrigerator. These ordinary rhythms, mundane yet comforting, were a testament to survival, to the simple persistence of life in the face of cruelty. Fear had once ruled this space. Now, vigilance tempered it, and purpose defined it. Every heartbeat, every breath, carried gratitude, awareness, and a renewed commitment to protect what mattered most. The encounter had changed us, yet it had also clarified our priorities. Justice is not always public, and victory is not always loud. Sometimes, it is measured in the quiet moments after chaos, in the strength to stand tall when intimidation looms, in the unshakable resolve to protect family and dignity. Our struggle was far from over. The world remains complex, dangerous, and unjust. But in that night, we discovered an undeniable truth. Courage, resolve, and love are more potent than fear, more enduring than cruelty. And as I watched my wife cradle our child, I understood that survival is not merely about resisting violence. It is about claiming space, reclaiming agency, and living fully despite the darkness. The shadows will return as they always do, yet so will the light. And every act of resistance, every moment of courage, echoes farther than the fear it confronts. How far would you go to protect what you love? And what price would you pay for justice?